right, so we are at 10:01, so it's time to get started. Thank you everyone for joining the second of our masterclass series. Today we're going to be talking about communications planning, and we're going to get started in just a minute, but first a couple pieces of admin. First is that if you're watching and you want to join the conversation on Twitter or LinkedIn, use the hashtag TEVE or hashtag TE Masterclass. And if you're having any watching parties, please share video with us. Feel free to use the chat in Zoom to let us know who you are and where you're joining from. Amelia is here as well to answer your questions, and I'll keep an eye on it. So my name is Teala Beischer, and I'm an engagement coach here at Thoughtexchange. I work with our district partners to help them run their exchanges and to coach them on how they can use Thoughtexchange to transform their culture. This means that I help people design exchanges that will best serve their objectives and their leadership goals. So today, as part of our masterclass series, we're focusing in on communications planning for an exchange. So we'll spend about 10 to 15 minutes hearing about that topic, and then we'll run an exchange at the end and have a Q&A session because of that exchange from all of our attendees. Perfect. So today your masterclass will teach you the basics of building a communications plan for your exchange. And there's three basic elements that we're going to cover. We're going to cover what makes a great communication plan, what are the three phases to build your plan around, and how can you continue the conversation with your participants. First, we'll start off talking about what makes a great communication plan, and the communication that you send out before, during, and after your exchange really sets the tone for your participants. A great communication plan will help you get the word out, build excitement, and keep your stakeholders informed as your exchange moves through the different phases. The earlier that you get on communicating with stakeholders, the greater that your participation will be. So you can really see that incentive. You communicate early, you get more participation. And by running exchanges, you're really inviting your community into the conversation. Each voice is heard, valued, and given the opportunity to continue the conversation. It builds trust, it builds ownership, it builds inclusivity, and building a plan supports all of your leadership opportunities in that it invites all of those voices to the conversation. As an exchange leader thinking about your communications plan, your main role is to be mindful of all who should be invited to your conversation and to ensure that they're given equal opportunity to participate. And that's where the plan comes in. So what makes a plan more effective? First, it's well thought out and it's predefined. So it's a plan. Second is that it meets stakeholders on their levels. Different groups in your audience prefer to be communicated to in different ways. So how you reach out to them to talk about your exchange will really vary. It also uses multiple platforms. So you're not just relying on email, you're not just relying on word of mouth, you're using social, email, word of mouth, a variety of different things to reach as many participants as possible. And another great tip is to use champions in your stakeholder groups. So an example of this could be if you're running an engage with students, get student champions involved promoting the exchange. So maybe you have your student council do something. Maybe you have students that are really active in the student body, promote it and get other people engaged. It also uses creative communication strategies, and it feels natural to your audience. Most importantly, most effective communications plans are unique. Because every exchange is different, every communication plan will be a little bit different. With smaller exchanges, you may need less communication, but with community or organization-wide exchanges, you'll likely need more communication, and you'll find that your communications plans and methods fluctuate depending on what your audience is and what your objectives are. So what are those three areas to consider in each plan? The first is plan, the second is live, and the third is discover. And those are really the phases that an exchange goes through. You start with the planning phase or the pre-live, then you go live, and that's the period where your participants are sharing and starring thoughts. And then discover is once it's closed, when you're working with your data and sharing your results back. Before you start building your communications plan, you'll want to ensure that you have your objectives and your question clearly defined. Your objectives are, as a throwback to last week's masterclass, why you're running the exchange and what you'll do with the results. If you haven't had the opportunity to view that yet, it's posted on our website and you can watch last week's where Steve walked us through building our objectives. And your question is the actual question for the exchange. And to learn more about question design, you can attend next week's masterclass, which will be all about question and introduction design. Perfect. So let's talk more about the planning phase, which is all about getting buy-in and building excitement with your team and your stakeholders. You can also think of this as your pre-live phase. It encompasses all of the things and communications you're completing before going live. During this phase, you'll clearly communicate the who, the why, the when, and the how. So who's invited to participate? Why? What's the context for them? What's the value for them? What are you going to do with the information? The when is it going live? And how long can they participate for? When is the deadline? And how do they actually log into Thoughtexchange and participate? So there's basically a couple different things that you can think of including during this phase, and it's thinking about both your internal and your external communication. So internal would be things like letting your team know about the plan. How does Thoughtexchange work? What are your expectations for your team in terms of them supporting you? Is anyone going to be helping you moderate, etc.? And then externally, you want to start building that excitement or that hype. So that can be things like building an online presence. Maybe you have a teaser posted on your Facebook page or your Twitter page with your launch date and a little explanation of join the conversation. Outside of social, you could also look at traditional messaging mediums. So maybe including a preview of it in your newsletters, in any notes that you're writing, leaving voice messages even can be a really personal way to invite people to your conversation. And then another thing to do is to start brainstorming some untraditional platforms. Do you have a unique way of communicating with your stakeholders that aren't just social media or emails? Think of that and then leverage that to reach out to a wider group of your participants. Remember that during this phase, your most important thing is to build excitement for the exchange and knowledge of what the context and the why is. A really practical thing to do during this phase is to make a plan of who you want to invite and what's the best way to invite them. So this could mean preparing your email lists, making sure that they're clean. It could mean scheduling time at a town hall or a meeting with your organization to discuss the exchange opportunity in person. Again, looping back to that concept of considering how your stakeholders or participants want to be communicated to and meeting them there. The other thing that you'll do during this time is to start thinking about your discover strategy. And your discover strategy and your plan for that will involve pulling other team members in. So who do you want supporting you? And thinking about this before you go live will really set yourself up for success in Discover. Perfect. So the next phase, you have your plan, you've invited everyone to participate on launch day, you set your exchange to live, and then you're in the live phase. And this phase is all about clearly communicating that your exchange is live and how to participate. And there's 3 basic things that you want to include or make sure that you address during the live phase. Your launch day communication, so your email invitations that my exchange is live now, or your in-person invitations, depending on how you're managing that. Your reminder messaging. So during an exchange period or while it's live, it's really helpful and can really drive participation to send out reminders to your participants, asking them to hop back in and share or rate more thoughts. And then the last thing is your closing day messaging. So on the last day of your exchange, sending out one final reminder to your participants, asking them to hop back in and rate more thoughts. Remember, the more thoughts that you have rated, the higher your data set will be and the more accurate it will reflect. Perfect. So these reminders, they could be in the form of those traditional communication methods that we talked about, such as during the plan phase, like emails or voicemails, or they can be pretty creative. Lots of our thought partners will use things like Twitter or Facebook to engage with their stakeholders, and they'll even grab little screenshots of the top thoughts that have been shared so far. Share them on Twitter with a little join the conversation and a link to your exchange. It'll re-invite people back into it and make them excited. If you want a visual representation, you can see that I have here an example of a word cloud. And every exchange has a word cloud in its Discover dashboard and TE Labs. You can grab a screenshot of your word cloud and share it out with your participant group. Say, here's a visual representation of the conversation so far. Hop back in and share your thoughts. It's a really exciting way to give that hype. Perfect. So, summary of the live phase, your primary objective is to drive thoughtful participation. So the final phase is the discover phase. And once your exchange closes, you and your team are going to work into working with your results and building a strategy based on them. Your communications plan during this phase will thank your participants for joining the conversation and clearly outline when the results will be shared back. Internally, your communications plan will address all those on your team who are going to be supporting you in the Discover strategy and a clear explanation of what that strategy is. We will have a masterclass later on this year, I believe at the end of October, on building your Discover strategy, so be sure to attend that to learn more. The final thing to do, and the thing that's maybe the most exciting about running a thought exchange, is continuing the conversation. So as opposed to a traditional survey where you send results out and then you share those results back, exchanges give you the opportunity to turn feedback into a conversation that's not one-sided or singular. And continuing the conversation and sharing results back like this is essential to stakeholder buy-in to any decisions and action taken as a result of the conversation. We see that the more that our district partners share results back with their stakeholders, the more that they're incentivized to participate in future exchanges and to really have that buy-in with any decisions that come from this exchange. So what does continuing the conversation look like in practice? It looks like communicating results to all of your stakeholders, following up with your team, your board, your cabinet, your executive leadership team. It's a wrap-up email to staff, thanking them for supporting, and a wrap-up email to your community or to your larger audience. And then there's two pieces that really boost your continuing the conversation step, and those are leader comments and published customized reports. So leader comments, and you can see an example here, they're a way for you to leave a comment on a thought. It builds a two-way conversation to help you build progress and trust. Leader comments turn your conversation from a one-way, let's send this report out and hope someone reads it experience into a real and meaningful two-way dialogue between participants and leaders. Comments enable leaders and the leadership team to directly answer questions, provide clarity, address concerns, and share appreciation for thoughts submitted. This builds authenticity and connection. When people see that their thoughts are respected, considered, and most importantly, valued, they're much more likely to offer their thoughts again in the future. Here's a few tips for you to consider when you're thinking about writing your leader comments. First, don't pick and choose which thoughts to comment on. Make a decision to comment on the top X amount of thoughts. So maybe the top 5, the top 10, the top 20, or if you're doing theme comments, which are an opportunity to write a leader comment on a theme set, write them on each theme. That way it doesn't feel like you're picking and choosing or favoritizing anything. Another tip is to acknowledge the courage and interest that the participant demonstrated. Sharing thoughts isn't always easy for people, especially if it's about a difficult issue. And then my third tip for you is to be curious. If there's a thought that really made you pause and consider, be sincere and open about that. Let them know what your interaction, what it was like. Keeps the conversation going even after the exchange. So the second part of continuing the conversation is to create a published report and share that back with your community. It's important to share these results back so that they directly engage with them and feel connection to the action that you're going to drive because of the conversation. So there's a tool built into Thoughtexchange to make this really easy for you. It's called Publish or Summary Reports, and you'll find it in your Discover dashboard. All you do is head to your dashboard, click on Publish, and then click on New, and you have the opportunity to customize the text for your report. Basically what they are custom web pages. They'll have your question, they'll have your participation stats. You have the opportunity to include your top thoughts report and your themes report. And then you also get the chance to customize that text. So adding in those custom messages, again, really personalizes it. It really makes it more of a conversation, and it will really incentivize both people's buy-in to your decision-making and to future exchanges too. Perfect. So those are the very basics of communications planning in Plan, Live, Discover, and then continuing the conversation. What I'm going to do now is set up an exchange really quickly so that I can hear your thoughts and questions, and then I'll address them. Perfect. So I'm going to set up the exchange here for you. I have this all ready to go. And the question is, what thoughts or questions do you have about exchange communications planning? And what I'm going to do is, you can see that I have my Create Exchange window open. I'm just going to paste the question that I had prepared there. If I didn't have one prepared, I could have just clicked on Question Library and found an appropriate one. I'm not going to write an introduction today because we're live in the room. You just had my verbal introduction. Click on Save. I'm going to turn off Sign Up or Login Required. Click on Launch, and then I'm going to pop the link to that in the chat here. Perfect. So please access the link from the chat and join our exchange. I'm going to give you about 3 to 4 minutes to share and rate thoughts. And while we do that, I'm going to be quiet, which is always a little bit hard to just sit here quietly and stare at the screen, but that's important. So as a reminder, please rate about 20 to 30 thoughts if possible. The star step is really where the magic happens. This is where you're thinking critically about your priorities and your opinions, and you're starting to build empathy with the views of other participants. Perfect. And while you're rating those last few thoughts, I'm going to show my Connections tab. So this shows thoughts being shared and rated while they're happening. It's a visual representation. If you're ever hosting a live in the room exchange, this can be a really exciting thing to present up on whatever your projector is, so that people, while they're noodling over and rating, they have something to look up at. So I'm going to hop into top thoughts now and start walking through a couple of them. So we'll click on thoughts here and just walk through a couple of these questions. So the first one is, I'll zoom in a little bit. What are the best ways to share out an exchange? Facebook, email, or Twitter? And that's a great question. And it really comes back to thinking about who your audience is and who you're inviting to participate. If you are just inviting your staff, likely email is probably the best way to reach them, because then you're just sending out an email to those invited. If you were to put that staff exchange on something like Twitter, you could think about the fact that anyone with the link could participate, so you would no longer just have staff participating. Whereas with a community engagement, if you're reaching out to a whole community, you're likely going to want to use social because you might not have the email of everyone in the community. So really think back to that question of who's your audience, who do you want to participate, and what's the best way to reach those people? Perfect. Next question. What are some of the most effective communication strategies you've seen leaders use? What's been the most effective at piquing people's interest in the conversation? I love this. I always find that the most effective conversation or the most effective communication strategies are those that share the results back. So remember, during the plan phase of the presentation, we looked at that word cloud, or we had that top thought conversation. If you share back what's already happening, people will feel really motivated and like they want to join the conversation. What are the best ways to remind or encourage participants to go back in and star more thoughts at a later date? Very similar to the answer that we just had. It's sharing what's already happened in the conversation and asking them to join it. And those could be email reminders, those could be social posts. And that kind of ties into a question that I saw down at the bottom here about how often that you should send reminders or when you should send reminders. we usually recommend if you're doing email to do a midway email and then a final day email, but you could opt if you're doing social to do them more frequently than that. So maybe a social post every morning you tweet about, hey, our exchange is still alive. Look at this thought that was shared yesterday. Hop in and rate it. Perfect. How much promotion have you found suitable that doesn't cause TE burnout? That is great and really addresses, I think I just addressed that. So be cautious with your email reminders that you're not sending too many. And that will really vary depending on who your participant group is and what your communications with them are already like. You'll want to use something that's similar to the strategies that you're currently using. How many reminders are appropriate if you're leaving an exchange up for a while? Usually what we recommend, and this ties into the next question, how much lead time should you give participants, or how long should you leave an exchange open for? If it's a larger exchange, 7 to 10 days is a great amount of time for you to have people participate, but not forget about it, but still feel motivated. So leave it open for a week and send a couple reminders within that week via email. Perfect. And then I'll answer 2 more questions here and then we'll wrap up as well. What is a reasonable length of time to share the report? Still new to the process. That is such a good question. And again, it really depends on what your objectives are. Obviously, you want to share the report back while it's still fresh in people's mind. Sending something out 6 months later, likely they'll have forgotten about it. But if 6 months later you're starting a new incentive or new action or a new exchange, you can remind people about the exchange that happened 6 months ago. So trying to be timely about it, but also make sure that you've done your theming work, you're prepared with your strategy, and then you're ready to send it out. What's nice about that publish tool is that it's really quick and easy to actually create that report. So it's not adding in any extra time to your communications plan to build a custom website or reach out to your IT team. You can just create that publish report right away. And then the last question is that I'll address here in the presentation today is, how can I get people on board when many people think this is just another app? It's important because I fear only a certain few will participate, and that won't be an accurate representation of our people. I love this question, and it's something that most new customers end up asking us. And really the thing that you can do is build trust by demonstrating those sharing back techniques. So continuing the conversation with people will show them that Thoughtexchange isn't just a survey tool. It's not just an app, it's a conversation starter. And as a leader, it's your responsibility to continue that conversation. So use those leader comments, share your published reports, and when you're doing future exchanges, reference back to your old ones and show that you did make progress because of those exchanges. Again, that'll help with your stakeholder buy-in. So what I'm going to do with the rest of these comments or these thoughts is I'll actually leave leader comments and share a report back with all of you via email. I'll also share all of the resources that I have, so my presentation, and then all of the tips and tricks that we talked about. Thank you so much for joining today. If you do want to stay behind and ask questions, we'll keep the line open and we can put whoever stays on video so we can have a chat. We can do kind of an impromptu office hour. And I do want to let you know about the other events that are happening this week. So we have one other event this week on Wednesday. It's Empowering Women in Educational Leadership with Cindy Wood. So Angela and Cindy will be talking about what does it mean to fake it till you make it in the workplace. So we hope to see you there. You can register for that on our site, and Amelia will post the link in the chat. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope that it was really valuable and you learned some new tricks in terms of promoting and managing your exchanges. And again, I'll stay on the line to answer any questions if you want to have an office hour and do a bit of a workshop. Thanks so much.